A country most Americans can't find on a map just embarrassed the United States Congress and did it with a single tweet. Your government has spent nearly a decade dodging serious questions about Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, alleged immigration fraud, a mysterious marriage, and a district sitting at the center of what prosecutors are calling a $9 billion fraud operation. But what we're going to go over is the fact that it took a partially recognized African nation, one Washington doesn't even officially acknowledge, to say out loud what federal investigators apparently couldn't. This is the story Washington hoped you'd forget. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to RPW Media, where we cover the stories that the mainstream media either buries, spins, or pretends never happen. And if you like our videos already and you haven't done so, you should become a subscriber, hit that notification bell, and smack the like button. Thank you. All right, let's talk about something that when I first read it, it made me stop and reread it because it didn't feel real. I mean, it's not complicated. It's actually very simple. It's almost too simple. A small, partially recognized country in Africa decided publicly to mock the United States Congress over a sitting member's unresolved immigration scandal. And honestly, they had a point. The Republic of Somaliland, which, let's be honest, most Americans never heard of outside of some screwy ties to the massive amount of fraud in Minnesota, they jumped into an ongoing controversy surrounding Representative Ilhan Omar this week, after Vice President JD Vance said publicly that he and the White House advisor, Stephen Miller, believe Omar definitely committed immigration fraud against the United States of America. Now, Somaliland posted on X, said, deportation? Please. You're just sending the princess back to her kingdom. And then, and this is the part that should make every American uncomfortable, they added, extradition? Say the word. Just sit with that for a second, guys. A government the United States doesn't even officially recognize is more interested in the accountability than Washington has been in nearly 10 years about Ilhan Omar. That's not a punchline, guys. It's a verdict. Here's what makes this story impossible to ignore. The questions aren't new. They've been very, very carefully avoided. The allegations surrounding Omar's 2009 marriage to a man named Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi have been circulating since about at least 2016. The core accusation is this. Elmi is her biological brother, and the marriage was used to help him obtain legal status in the United States. Now, before anyone says this is a right-wing conspiracy theory cooked up in some political back room, it's worth noting where the accusation originated. I mean, it didn't come from conservatives in Minneapolis. I don't think there are any conservatives in Minneapolis. It came from inside the Somali community in Minneapolis. People who knew both Omar and Elmi personally raised it first. A person named Osman, a community leader in Minneapolis, told the Daily Mail in 2020 that he personally knew both of them and that they were younger when he knew them, and that Omar had introduced Elmi as her brother from London. He also recalled that Omar would talk about her sibling trying to get papers. That detail matters, guys, because it's not an abstraction. It's a specific word. It's a specific context, remembered by a specific person. Quote, no one knew there had been a wedding to Elmi until the media turned up the marriage certificates years later, Osman said. Now, after that, the investigations began. Journalist David Steinberg spent 3 years reviewing records from both the United States and the United Kingdom. Judicial Watch later concluded the findings pointed to possible marriage fraud, questionable statements in divorce records, and inconsistencies in tax filings. In other words, they lied. They tried to scam the United States for immigration. The Washington Examiner reviewed documents in 2019 and found conflicts in Omar's own accounts. The FBI reportedly opened an investigation in 2020. And then, well, nothing. The kind of nothing that only happens when someone somewhere decides something isn't worth pursuing. Time passed, administrations changed, Omar rose to national prominence, the allegations didn't disappear, they just got quieter. Her responses remain remarkably consistent throughout. The accusations are bigoted lies. The critics are racist. And the attention is unfair. And for nearly a decade, that response worked. But in January 2026, Representative Nancy Mace tried to push for a subpoena of Omar's immigration records. It failed. As Mace put it afterwards, Washington did what it always does. It protects its own. So that sentence deserves more attention than it usually gets. This isn't about one political party protecting one person for partisan reasons. I mean, though that's part of it. There's something deeper at work here. A bipartisan institutional reflex in Washington to avoid situations that create chaos, that generate uncomfortable hearings, that force people, powerful people, to answer for things that they'd rather not answer for. It's not a conspiracy. It's just cowardice dressed up as caution. But now things are they're changing. Things are changing. JD Vance brought the whole issue back into the spotlight, and he connected it to something much bigger. Federal prosecutors have described what they are calling industrial scale fraud. It's an operation tied to Minnesota's Somali community. Guess who represents them? We're not talking about some minor benefits irregularity here. We're talking about welfare programs, Medicaid, housing assistance, food programs, medical claims. The total could reach $9 billion of your tax dollars. Assistant U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson put it plainly, saying, the fraud is not small. It isn't isolated. The magnitude cannot be overstated. Nearly 100 people have been charged so far. Prosecutors say organizations claimed to serve thousands of children who did not exist. They billed for treatments for patients who were never there. They reported services for people who were not real. Money was spent on luxury items. Funds were sent overseas. Some of those funds, they say, went to designated terrorist organizations. The Treasury Department is now reviewing whether any of this money reached Al-Shabaab. They are designated as a terrorist organization. Now, here's where it gets uncomfortable. Ilhan Omar represents a congressional district with the largest Somali American population in the United States, bar none. These fraud operations existed in that same community for years. Vance asked a direct question, saying, I'm also worried about what did Ilhan Omar know about what was happening in the Somali community, and why was nobody looking into it until, frankly, Donald Trump came along? That's a fair question. Not because there's proof Omar personally participated in the fraud. Vance himself said he's not certain about that. But because basic oversight of a situation this large in a district this closely tied to the community involved seems like exactly the kind of thing a representative is supposed to be doing. The absence of that oversight isn't automatically evidence of guilt, but asking about it isn't a witch hunt either. Especially when we now know that she lied to the United States. She committed fraud on immigration. The issue is that even the idea of asking has been treated as off limits. Why? Critics frame it as political targeting. No, it's called criminal targeting. They point to lack of charges while they invoke her identity as a shield. And yet those same critics have enthusiastically supported investigations into other public figures based on far thinner evidence. The Constitution doesn't protect elected officials from scrutiny. It actually requires accountability. Imagine that. If an ordinary citizen like you or me faced accusations that were credible of immigration fraud, there would be an investigation. And there would be consequences. Immigration fraud is a serious federal crime. It carries prison time, significant fines, and can result in loss of citizenship. The law only works when it applies to everyone. And right now, it's not entirely clear that it does. It's not just about punishing the guilty. It's about not protecting them either. Vance says the administration is working to determine what the legal remedies are and how to build a case necessary to get some justice for the American people. That's the right approach. Proper investigation, legal process, present evidence. There's transparency questions, too. If there's proof, charges should follow. Then if there isn't, the case gets closed clearly and publicly so the questions stop. What cannot continue is the current pattern where serious allegations are simply ignored because addressing them would be a little too inconvenient for a certain political party, which is exactly why Somaliland's response went viral. It wasn't a serious diplomatic offer. It was sarcasm, but good sarcasm cuts because it's true. A member of Congress with nearly a decade of unresolved questions, representing a district at the center of a multi-billion with a B dollar fraud investigation, has managed to avoid any serious scrutiny whatsoever. She always cries racism and everybody backs down. A nation that doesn't have a seat at the UN noticed this. They pointed at it. And a lot of Americans laughed because they recognized it. Now, here's the bottom line. This story isn't really about Ilhan Omar. It's about whether the rule of law in this country means something. Democrats are always saying no one's above the law, except us. And it's also about whether it's just a standard applied selectively depending on who you are, who you know, and how loudly you can call your accusers racist. I mean, the good news, though, the $9 billion fraud case is moving forward. Real prosecutions are already happening. The Treasury Department is following the money. And for the first time in nearly a decade, someone in a position of actual authority is asking the questions that should have been asked years ago, if you ask me. The system is slow, it's imperfect, but it's moving. And the American people, all of them, deserve to know where it leads. All right, tell me what you think about this in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.